3 white pickup trucks rolled into the cul-de-sac at exactly 4:47 p.m. They weren't in a hurry, but the moment I saw the green lettering on the doors, I knew everything was about to change. USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. The trucks didn't stop at my house. They stopped at hers. Henrietta Voss, right in the middle of the Willowmere Estates summer social. The string lights were still hanging. Kids were still playing. A bounce house slowly lost air in the background. Henrietta stood frozen on her porch, still holding her HOA clipboard. But for the first time in 14 months, she had absolutely nothing to say. For over a year, I had been the villain in her story. The difficult neighbor, the rule breaker, the problem. The funny part, I never once raised my voice. I simply let the truth catch up. My name is Thomas Varga. Most of my neighbors thought I was just a quiet retired man who kept a few chickens and spent too much time talking to his tomato plants. They were only half right. What they didn't know was that I had spent 26 years as a livestock compliance officer with the Department of Agriculture. The last 11 years, I specialized in poultry regulations, commercial farms, backyard flocks, licensing, health inspections. I knew every rule, and I knew exactly how they worked. I never told my neighbors. After my wife Elena passed away, I stopped talking about my past. The 6 hens in my backyard had been her idea. She bought them before she got sick. 4 Orpingtons, 2 Wyandotters. She used to say, a backyard should wake up to chickens, not just sprinklers, even after she was gone. Those hens kept laying eggs, and somehow, feeding them every morning made me feel like a small part of Elena was still with me. So I kept them. I built the coop myself, made sure everything met county code. 6 hens, no roosters, plenty of space, everything completely legal. Our HOA's original bylaws even allowed small backyard flocks on lots larger than 1/3 of an acre. My property measured 0.41 acres. I'd checked it twice. I had no idea. Those 6 chickens were about to start a war. Most of my neighbors only knew me as the quiet widower, the man who waved from his porch and sometimes shared fresh zucchini bread. Nobody knew what I had done for a living, and I preferred it that way. After 26 years as a livestock compliance officer, I was done with inspections, done with citations, done with paperwork. I'd seen farmers lose everything over failed inspections. I'd watched families cry as entire flocks were destroyed by disease. By the time I retired, I wanted nothing to do with rules anymore. Eleanor's 6 hens were different. They weren't a business. They weren't an operation. They were simply a reminder of her. Willowmere Estates was a quiet neighborhood. 42 homes, a small lake, walking trails, friendly neighbors. For years, the HOA was led by Doug Ferris, a fair man. When I built my chicken coop in 2019, Doug approved it without hesitation. Then he moved away, and everything changed. Henrietta Voss became the new HOA president. Most of us didn't think much about the election. That turned out to be a mistake. Henrietta was impossible to ignore. Perfect silver hair, a spotless white Range Rover, and a laminated HOA clipboard she carried everywhere. She treated the rulebook like it was the law. Every time she issued a warning, she tapped the clipboard twice. Within her first month, families were getting violation notices over mailbox colors. One neighbor was cited for an old garden gnome, another for decorations that had been there for years. I remember watching all of it, thinking, glad it's not me. I had no idea. I was next. One Tuesday morning, a cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox. It carried the Willowmere Estates HOA seal. The moment I opened it, everything changed. The letter accused me of violating HOA rules. It quoted Section 7, subsection C. No livestock or farm animals allowed. I had 30 days to remove my hens, or face growing fines. There was just one problem. The letter ignored the grandfather clause, the same clause that legally allowed my coop. Doug Ferris had approved it himself. In writing. I read the notice twice, then set it down beside my coffee. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. I'd spent decades reading violation notices. You learn very quickly which ones are valid, and which ones aren't. This one wasn't. Still, I decided to handle it politely. That afternoon, I drove to Henrietta's house carrying a folder. Inside was every approval document I needed. She answered the door, clipboard already in her hands, as if she'd been waiting for me. I smiled. Mrs. Voss, I think there's been a misunderstanding. My coop was approved years ago. I even brought the paperwork. I held out the folder. She never touched it. Instead, she tapped her clipboard twice. The board has updated its interpretation of Section 7. She claimed grandfathered coops required annual renewal paperwork. I knew that wasn't true. I'd read those bylaws cover to cover, but I didn't argue. I simply nodded, said I'd review everything. then drove home. That evening, I mentioned it to my neighbor, Costas Antonio. He'd lived in Willowmere longer than almost anyone. When I told him what happened, he just laughed. Doug never would have done that. It's just a new HOA president trying to make a name for herself. Give it a month. She'll find someone else to bother. I believed him. Honestly, I thought the problem was already over. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 weeks later, Henrietta made her next move. She called the police, not for a crime, for my chickens. She reported excessive odor and excessive noise. On a Saturday morning, 2 officers knocked on my door. I was still wearing my robe. They inspected the coop. It was clean, no smell, no mess. Everything was exactly as it should be. One of the officers smiled and said, "Honestly, sir, I've smelled worse walking past a candle shop." 10 minutes later, they left. No warning, no citation, nothing. As I watched the patrol car drive away, I noticed something. Henrietta was standing behind her front window, watching, clipboard pressed against her chest. She hadn't called because there was a problem. She called because she wanted one. I decided to try one last peaceful conversation. A few days later, I found her at the community mailboxes. I said, "The officers confirmed everything is legal. If you have concerns, please talk to me first." She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Mr. Varga, I have 41 other homeowners to protect. Livestock operations affect property values." She called my 6 backyard hens a livestock operation. I looked at her and quietly replied, "They're pets. They belong to my wife." For just a second, her expression changed. Then it disappeared. "I'll make a note of your position," she said. Then she walked away. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was only the beginning. A few weeks later, I was grilling dinner in my backyard. The radio was playing softly. Everything felt normal. Then I heard sirens. Not one vehicle. 3. 2 police cruisers and an animal control truck. They pulled into my driveway with their lights flashing. Neighbors came outside to watch. An officer walked up to me and said, "We received a 911 call. The report claimed I was operating an illegal livestock facility. It also claimed there was a disease outbreak and contaminated runoff flowing into the neighborhood lake. Someone had turned 6 backyard hens into a public health emergency, and I already knew exactly who had made that call." The officers inspected everything. The coop, the feed, the water, the drainage. My neighbors watched from their porches, like they were waiting for someone to be arrested. Then the animal control officer spoke. "This is one of the cleanest backyard flocks I've seen. Everything is fully compliant." She looked at the police officer and added, "Whoever reported this greatly exaggerated the situation." That was it. No citation, no warning, no violation, but the damage had already been done. Red and blue lights had filled my driveway. My neighbors had watched the whole thing, exactly the way Henrietta wanted. Later that evening, Costas walked over carrying the spatula from his grill. He stood beside me in silence for a while. Then he finally said, "This was never about chickens. It was about making you look guilty." He was right. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to knock on Henrietta's door again. I wasn't going to argue, and I definitely wasn't going to beg. Instead, I was going to find out why she was trying so hard to destroy me. Because after 26 years in compliance work, I'd learned something important. The loudest accuser is often hiding the biggest secret. So I started paying attention, quietly, patiently, without letting anyone know. Then I noticed something strange. Behind Henrietta's house, there was a narrow service alley, the same alley everyone used for trash collection. Twice that week, I saw a refrigerated delivery van parked behind her fence, once before sunrise, once late at night. The timing made no sense. At first, I ignored it. Then my instincts kicked in. A few days later, I set up an old trail camera, not on her property, on mine, pointed only toward the public alley. I wasn't spying. I wasn't trespassing. I wasn't breaking any laws. I simply wanted to know why refrigerated trucks kept visiting a woman who seemed obsessed with my 6 backyard chickens. And deep down, I had a feeling I was finally looking in the right direction. Over the next 2 weeks, the trail camera answered every question. Henrietta wasn't just keeping a few chickens. She had a large mobile coop hidden behind her privacy fence, far bigger than mine. Then I noticed something else. Large cardboard egg flats, the kind that hold 30 eggs at a time, not grocery cartons. Commercial trays at the neighborhood mailbox. People unknowingly filled in the rest. They talked about Henrietta's farm fresh eggs, how she sold them every Saturday. Cash only. No one thought anything of it. I did, to be sure. I visited the local farmer's market. There I met a vendor named Marta. The moment I mentioned Willowmere, she smiled. "Oh, the egg lady. Henrietta. According to Marta, Henrietta sold eggs cheaper than everyone else. She didn't pay for a market permit. She didn't have inspections. She simply sold from her house. That changed everything. Because selling eggs isn't the same as keeping backyard chickens. Commercial egg sales require licenses, health inspections, proper food safety records. Those aren't HOA rules. They're state agricultural laws. The same laws I'd enforced for 26 years. The woman accusing me of creating a public health risk was secretly running an unlicensed egg business. Before making a move, I wanted absolute proof. So I waited. Then I visited 2 different families who regularly bought from her. I introduced myself honestly, asked a few simple questions. Both confirmed the same story. They bought eggs from Henrietta almost every Saturday. Cash only. No receipts. Now I had everything. Multiple witnesses, video evidence, commercial egg trays, and a hidden flock much larger than anyone realized. This wasn't neighborhood gossip anymore. It was a documented violation. A real one. And unlike Henrietta's accusations against me, this one could actually be proven. The turning point didn't happen during an argument. It happened at my kitchen table. Late at night, I sat there looking at 2 folders. One held months of false complaints against me. The other held weeks of evidence against Henrietta. That's when I realized something. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need revenge. I simply needed the truth to reach the right people. For 26 years, I'd written compliance reports. I knew one thing better than anyone. A quiet report, filed through the proper channel, is far more powerful than shouting. So I prepared a professional case. No emotion, no exaggeration, just facts. Photos from the trail camera, witness statements, commercial egg trays, evidence of cash sales. Everything organized exactly the way I'd done it throughout my career. Then I sent it to the USDA. Because unlicensed egg sales aren't just an HOA issue. They're a government issue. Before submitting the report, I noticed one more thing. Willowmere's annual summer social was only weeks away. Henrietta organized it every year, which meant one thing. She would definitely be home. If inspectors decided to visit, that would be the perfect day. So I filed the complaint. Then I made one final move. I protected myself. I renewed every piece of paperwork for my own flock, collected written confirmation from the county, printed every approval, filed every document. If anyone knocked on my door again, I'd be ready. After 14 months, there was nothing left for Henrietta to use against me. The only question now was how long it would take for the paperwork to catch up with her. Then came the hardest part. Waiting. Henrietta had no idea what was coming. In fact, she tried one last scare tactic. A certified letter arrived at my house. She threatened to fine me $500 every week unless I removed my chickens. I read it once, folded it, and put it away. I didn't even reply. There was no point. My report was already moving through the proper channels. So I went back to living my life, feeding the hens every morning, repairing the fence, helping Costas move furniture. Every evening, I quietly checked my email. Then on the 16th day, it finally arrived. A simple message. My complaint had been assigned to a regional compliance officer. No inspection date, just a case number and a promise of follow-up. I printed the email, placed it beside my paperwork, then kept waiting. Some nights, I started doubting myself. What if they only mailed her a warning? What if she found out first and removed everything before inspectors arrived? Costas kept reminding me, "You spent half your career doing this. You know how the system works." He was right, but trusting the system feels very different when you're the one waiting. Then came the summer social. A bright Saturday afternoon, string lights, a bounce house, neighbors laughing, kids running through sprinklers. Henrietta stood in the center of it all. Floral dress, clipboard under one arm, smiling like she owned the neighborhood. I sat down with my folding chair, trying not to expect anything. Then, at exactly 4:47 p.m., 3 white pickup trucks turned into the cul-de-sac. And suddenly, everyone stopped talking. I recognized the logo immediately. Most of my neighbors didn't, but I did. USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. Right behind them, a state agriculture compliance truck. The same type I'd worked in for years. 2 inspectors stepped out. Calm, professional, no drama, just another inspection. They checked their clipboard, then walked straight past the summer social, past the grill, past the bounce house, straight to Henrietta's porch. The lead inspector looked at her and asked, "Mrs. Henrietta Voss? We're here regarding a complaint involving the unlicensed sale of animal products. We'll need access to your backyard." The color disappeared from her face. For the first time, Henrietta looked completely unprepared. "There must be some mistake," she stammered. "This is a private home, and we're hosting a community event." The second inspector calmly replied, We have an active complaint supported by documentation. We're required to inspect today." Then they walked toward her side gate. The entire neighborhood went silent. Costas turned off the grill. Kids stopped playing. Even Marta stood quietly watching. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone knew something big was about to happen. I stayed exactly where I was, holding my folding chair, saying nothing. I didn't need to. The inspectors disappeared behind Henrietta's fence. For the next 11 minutes, the whole neighborhood waited. No music, no laughter, just silence. Henrietta stood frozen on her porch, her clipboard hanging loosely at her side. The woman who had spent a year inspecting everyone else was finally being inspected herself. 11 minutes later, the inspectors came back. The lead inspector was carrying a clipboard full of notes. His voice was calm, professional, certain. "Mrs. Voss, we found an active flock of approximately 28 laying hens. We also found commercial egg packaging and evidence of regular unlicensed egg sales." He paused, then finished the sentence. "You are being issued a formal citation. All sales must stop immediately." The entire neighborhood stood silent. No one said a word. For the first time, Henrietta wasn't the one enforcing the rules. She was the one being held accountable. A little boy quietly asked his mother, "What's happening?" She smiled gently and whispered, "Just grown-up problems." Honestly, that was the perfect explanation. Henrietta tried to protest. "This is a mistake. I have every right to keep chickens." The inspector calmly replied, "No one is questioning your right to own chickens. We're citing the illegal commercial sale. Those are two very different things." Then he handed her the citation packet. Even from across the street, I could see her hands shaking. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Henrietta was fined nearly $3,000. She was ordered to stop selling eggs immediately. Any future violations would bring even heavier penalties. Then the HOA board called an emergency meeting. For months, many board members had quietly disagreed with Henrietta, but no one wanted to challenge her. Now they didn't have to. 11 days later, Henrietta resigned as HOA president. Officially, for personal reasons, a new president took over. One of the first things she did was review every violation Henrietta had issued. Mine was thrown out immediately, along with a written apology from the HOA. The same rule Henrietta claimed didn't exist had been there all along. She just hoped no one would ever read it. A few days later, the inspectors visited my property too, just to be thorough. They checked the coop, the fencing, the feed, the paperwork. 6 minutes later, the inspector smiled and shook my hand. "This is the cleanest backyard flock we've inspected all year. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing." I smiled, but I never told him. I used to do his job. Some things don't need to be said. In a neighborhood of 42 homes, news travels fast. Within days, everyone knew what had happened. Some stories were exaggerated. Some weren't. I never corrected anyone. After everything that happened, Henrietta's reputation wasn't my responsibility. The new HOA president, Adrienne, called me personally. She apologized for everything. Then she asked if I'd be willing to help review future animal-related HOA questions. I told her I'd think about it. I'm still thinking. Slowly, the neighborhood changed. People stopped avoiding me. Neighbors started asking about the hens. Marta opened a licensed egg stand nearby. Even though I had my own eggs, I bought from her anyway. It felt like the right thing to do. Henrietta still lives in the neighborhood. Sometimes we pass each other. She gives me a quick nod. I nod back. Neither of us says a word. We don't have to. Every morning, I still feed Elena's hens. And every morning, I'm reminded of something she once told me. The loudest person in the room is usually the one most afraid of being questioned. She was right. This story was never really about chickens. It was about patience, about knowing the truth and letting the facts speak louder than anger ever could. If you're dealing with someone who thinks rules only apply to everyone else, remember this. You don't have to shout. You don't have to argue. Sometimes one quiet report is enough to change everything. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. There are plenty more stories just like this. Until next time, take care.